Let's go on. Oh, so yesterday we had started this tshuva about lending money to people without witnesses, right? Remember, we started talking about that. That we quoted a Gemara yesterday that it is forbidden to lend someone money without witnesses. And the prohibition that was enumerated was the prohibition of lifnei iver lo titein michshol. Right, you're causing potentially the borrower to sin, because if he forgets and there's no evidence, he's going to essentially spend the rest of his life in sin, having not paid back a loan that he owes. And you also cause a sin to befall yourself, because it's going to make you look bad if you ask someone to pay you back something and there's no evidence and no one's on your side. It's going to make you look like a bad guy. Then we saw a story in the Gemara about Rav Ashi that he once sent a message to Ravina, please lend me a few bucks. I'm a little short before Shabbos for an investment. Can you send over some cash? And Ravina said, sure, send over the sofer and we'll draw up paper. In those days, it wasn't like a simple matter just to print something out on your computer. Mm-hmm. You had to get a scribe with paper and ink and a quill and write things up. And he said, you mean even from me, you need this? He says, Kol shekain kvodo shetored b'limudo v'yishkach lahachzerli. And so Ravina said back to him, I'm even more worried that you're going to forget than a regular person. You're so overwhelmed with your studies and all of your rabbinic responsibilities that you're more likely to forget about this than other people, right? Because, so v'chein kosov HaRambam, and then he quoted the Rambam. Okay, so that's what we're up to. Okay. Uvishailas utshuvas arugas habosim kosov liyashet minag haolam shalom makpidim lahalvos tamidim shtar ve'edim. He says that Sefer Arugas Habosim tries to explain why the minhag is that friends lend each other money without a contract, without witnesses. Kevin Sharav Nachman Tikein Shvua Midarabanan Lamisha Kafar Bahalva. He says because Rav Nachman said that anyone, normally, if a person is a kofer bakol, you know that term kofer bakol, it means you deny owing anything. A guy comes over to me and says, can you give me back the 100 that I lent you last week? And I say, what are you talking about? So then I'm totally putter, and I can just say, get lost, right, to the guy. But Rav Nachman came along and he said that rabbinically, if someone comes along and asks you for money that you owe them, even if you deny everything, you have to take a shavua. And it's for that reason that we're not worried that a person, even a forgetful person, is going to totally deny a loan. And they'll have to do some more investigation. And then eventually it'll be discovered that the person will remember. You'll be able to jog his memory. Umasha Rav Yehuda Amar Asur lahalvos b'lishtar ve'edim zehaya lifnei takanas Rav Nachman. And so when Rav Yehuda said that you're not allowed to lend money without paper, that was before Rav Nachman's institution of a shavua. But now that we have a shavua, right, it becomes less likely that a person is going to sin the rest of his life and not pay back his loans. Problem with that is that nowadays we don't have shavuas at all in Beis Din. And then he further says, Aval kvar hisegalav b'shut yabia omer midivrei halechem mishnah she'ein ha'isser shema yichbor haloi v'berishus uv'mezid. He says, and the Sefer Yabia Omer says, and that's by Rav Ovadia, he says, I don't understand how this is going to help. He says, if a person truly forgets that he borrowed money it's not that he's denying the loan out of malice, knowing that he's lying. Ela hachshashu sheyishkach es halva. V'yachal afilu lihishava l'sheker kivin shu saber shu omer emes. So aren't you just compounding the problem by instituting a shvua? Not only will he end up not paying back the money he owes, but he'll also end up taking a false shvua. Aval kishiyesh edim afilu imu lo yizkor chayiv l'shalim al pi ha'edim. This is the whole purpose of documentation of a promissory note signed by witnesses is so that a person will be forced to pay even if he has no recollection whatsoever of having borrowed money. So that really, instituting a shvua doesn't really doesn't really take the place of promissory notes. The haraya miravina sha'amar l'Rav Ashi kevin shekvodu torud b'limudohu lo chasha shema hu yichbor rak shema yishkach. And that was the whole point of the story, where, Ravina said, I'm happy to lend you money, but we need paper, because since you're so studious and you're so involved in the base medrash all day, I'm worried that you're just going to totally forget. It's going to go in one ear and out the other. You're like the absent-minded professor, right? V'harav Knesses Hagdola Kasav, that's who we saw in last night's shir, Da'afilu im yilvelo or yalvelo be'edim, zelo yazor l'mishi yirtza lichbor es ha'halva, ki yachol liton paraiti. And the Knesses Hagdola further says that even if you have witnesses who witness the loan, but there's no paper, he says that doesn't solve the problem either. Because if a person were to wish to deny the loan, he could always say, well, I paid you. Yeah, it's true, I borrowed $100 from you last week, but I also paid you back. Because in general, we paskin, even though the Gemara has the debate about this, that when you borrow money with witnesses, you don't have to pay it back with witnesses. But it will help if you have witnesses to remind a person who's forgetful. So if the concern is that the person is going to forget, then at least if you can't, let's say, draw a paper, at least have witnesses present. That at least will help somewhat. V'lochein lahalacha ein lanu ela divrei maran shepasa kedivrei hariv v'harambam v'harosh sha'adam shemalva b'li'edim oiver al v'lifnei iver lo sitein mechshol. But in the final analysis, we have to go with what the Shulchan Aruch says, what the Rambam, the Rif, and the Rush all say, is that if you lend someone money without a promissory note being written up, then you're in violation of lifnei iver. V'lochein adam shemal b'kesef la'acherim yesh lasos kein be'edim o bishtar o mashkon o sheyakabel mimenu check dachui sheyuchal lifroa bo eschovo v'yetze midei kol safek. And therefore, when a person lends money to other people, he should do it at least with witnesses if there's not going to be any paper drawn. But even better if there's paper, or there should be collateral, or at the very minimum, have the person give you a post-dated check. That's what a check dachui means. Post-dated check. Because listen, I understand you're pressed for cash. You need $100. Write me a check. What is a post-dated check? It's a promissory note. It's got your signature on it. It gives you rights of collecting from my assets. And so therefore that's what should be written. And then you remove yourself from any question of whether I'm in violation of halacha. And that's how we interpret the psukim in Tehillim, which say, Tov ish chonenu malveh, how good is a person who is benevolent and lends money. Yechalkel devarav b'mishpat. He will sustain his words with justice. Ki la'olam lo yimot. He will never fall away. Lezecher olam yiyeh tzadik. For as in eternal remembrance shall be his righteousness. Mishamua ra'a lo yira. He will not have to fear from any bad tidings. Nachon libo batuach b'Hashem. His heart will be secure, safe, or let's say confident in Hashem. And so he says this pasuk starts off by praising the person who is benevolent and lends money. Tov ish chonenu malveh kolomar demisha osa gemilus chasadim. That anyone who does an act of kindness, the next phrase is yechalkel devarav b'mishpat. He shall sustain his words with justice, meaning ya'aseh zot al pi halacha. He should do it according to halacha when he wants to be benevolent. Lahalvot dafka bishtaru be'edim, to lend money with a promissory note and witnesses. Ki la'olam lo yimot, because in that way it will never fall away. Ki yekabelis alva chazar, in other words, he's assured of getting his money back. L'zecher olam yeh tzadik, and for an eternal remembrance he shall be righteous. Shelo yavor alifnei ivra lo sitein michshalim, because he will not violate any prohibitions through his kindness. Mishamua ra lo yira, and he will never have to worry about bad tidings, meaning shelo yigram klolo la'atzmo, that he will not cause a curse to befall himself. So, in the final analysis, it's a very straightforward tshuva. A person should always lend money with a promissory note. And by the way, I've done this before, and I explained to the person, I'm not doing this because I don't trust you, but rather because it's the law of the Gemara, and it's doing both of us a favor. And as soon as you pay me back, I'll tear up the promissory note, and we are done. Okay, and that's the way it's supposed to be done. Now, again, as I started off yesterday when we discussed this, if a person is asking you for 20 or even 100, and you don't have time to draw up paper, then you can give him the money, but it should be with the intent that in the event this guy forgets, I'm moichel. But if you're not prepared to do that, then you should write up a piece of paper. And it'll take you literally 30 seconds to grab a scrap of paper and a pen and say, I, Plony, owe Plony B, such and such amount of money, payable by such and such a date. And have the guy.
You don't sign anything, and you want.
If nothing is signed, then you either are in violation of halacha, or if you want to avoid violating halacha, you should have in mind when you give him the money that in the event that you forget, I'm moichel, I forgive it. I'm giving it to you as a gift. Yeah. He would have to, the borrower would have to send the email to the lender, right? Saying, right, I'm confirming receipt of the money and I commit to pay you back by such and such a date. I think that would be sufficient. Yeah. But it's a good point. Let's say there's no paper, no pen, and you have WhatsApp, right? Or whatever. It just, yeah. Emails do work. We have to be careful with WhatsApp. I have disappearing messages. So if your WhatsApp is going to disappear in 7 days or 30 days, yeah, you may want to take a picture of it. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. It's a setting you set in WhatsApp. My messages disappear after 7 days. Otherwise, your phone, especially nowadays since the war, oh my gosh, it's never ending. Yeah, because it's probably cluttered. Yeah. There's a setting on your phone to clear out the data, you know. Okay, anyway. That's not for now. Yeah. Okay. Next tshuva. B'dinei v'taimei hamitzvah shelo sihi alo kenosha. Now we're going to study the law and the reason for the law of you may not be an oppressor to a debtor who has not yet paid you back. Hilvesi kesef lachaveri. So the shaila is as follows: I lent money to my friend, V'chanira she'en lo l'shalem, and it seems like he doesn't have the ability to pay me back. Anachnu mispalalim ba'oto beit hakneset v'nifgashim kol boker. We daven in the same shul, and we regularly see each other every morning. We sit next to each other in shul, and it's becoming very awkward. Okay, so ha'im alayli hitpalel beveit knesset acher kedei shelo lavor alav shelo tiya lo kenosha. Is should I perhaps daven in another shul so that I avoid the prohibition of do not be an oppressor to your friend, because every time he sees me, he probably feels yucky that he can't pay me back what he owes. Maybe I should daven in a different minyan. Yeah. What? Yeah, but there's no a prohibition in the Torah of there's an obligation in the Torah to pay back your loans. But if I don't have the money to pay you back, I'm not in violation of the Torah. But if you are constantly looking at me and saying, no, good morning, no, or at least it's implied, right? So then you could be in violation of the Torah just by being present in my face. Yeah. Right. Okay. So Hagemara, so here's the tshuva. Hagemara omeres ki asya ravdimi omar minayin lenosha b'chavero mana v'yodeya she'en lo she'osur laver lefanav. So let's take a look at the Gemara. The Gemara says that how do we know if Ruvain's the creditor, Shimon is the debtor, and Shimon owes $100 to Ruvain? How do we know that if Shimon doesn't have the money, that it is usher for Ruvain to even walk in front of him, to pass by him? Talmud Lomar lo siya lo kinosha. And the answer is you may not be his oppressor. V'chein pasak harambam asur la'adam leheraot atzmo lebal chovo bizman sheyodea she'en lo. It is forbidden for a creditor to appear in front of a debtor when he knows he doesn't have the wherewithal to pay back. Va'afilu lavar lefanav, just walking past him. Shelo yafchido v'lo yachlimo afal pi shehu lo tovea mimenu klum. Right, and even without any intention of frightening him or shaming him, just walking in front of him, he's and you're not asking him for anything. You're not saying no. You're not saying anything. That still is usher. Now, when the loan is due, it's only when the loan is due. Right, before the loan is due, there's nothing wrong, right? And by the way, in the footnote, he says this is quoted in the Shulchan Aruch, and as it says, because this is going to cause the guy either intimidation or embarrassment. Now, vatam bazeh ki maspik shero ro'eh oto halova v'al yedei zen ilchatz kamo shapirei shamarim shif. He says that all the debtor has to do is see the creditor, and he immediately feels pressure. As the Maram Shif writes, Shahatorah Amra lo tia lo kinosha, that you shall not be to him as an oppressor. Now, v'lichora hamila lo miyuteret. He says it would seem that the word lo is superfluous. Shahatorah tomar lo tihiyeh kinosha. Why doesn't the Torah just say, don't be an oppressor? Mazeh lo, don't be to him as an oppressor. What does that extra word to him mean? Ela afal pi she'ein b'daitcha liot lo nosheh, aval im haloven nira be'enav shata nosheh to asur. The answer is that even if it's not your intention to put any pressure on him, but your very presence is intimidating to him, that's what's asur. That's why the Torah says, don't be to him as an oppressor, meaning that you're not trying to intimidate him. You just want to get to your seat at Shacharis, right? But if you know that walking past him every morning is going to cause him intimidation, then it's to him you've become an oppressor to him, even though that's not your intention. And the Malbim explains that the way to understand this pasuk is based on the word kinoshe, like an oppressor. Shafilu shata lo noshe, rak nira kinoshe, dahainu shata over lefanavu choshev shata noshebo, asur. He says, you're not oppressing him. You have no intention. You just want to get to your seat. But it just appears to him that you are like an oppressor because your very presence is intimidating and bothersome to him. That is also usher, right? So, I mean, this is a general principle that if you know someone uh, sort of is upset by your presence because they're embarrassed because let's say you may know something about them that they wish you didn't know, or and there are other kinds of instances where your very presence could be hurtful to somebody. You should avoid those kinds of situations. Don't be in situations where your very presence is hurtful to another individual. Now, obviously, that's only when it's avoidable and when they haven't done anything wrong. But if they're completely in the wrong because they've done something shameful and you know about it, right? While it's true, you shouldn't, give them an opportunity to do tshuva and give them an opportunity to rehabilitate themselves and don't be in their face. But the only time that the Torah really requires you to stay away from them is when you've lent them money. That's the only time when the Torah really. It is even harder. And there may even come a point where you have to basically say, I have to forgive the loan because family is more important than the money. Yeah, it's not so clear that Shemitah removes the debt midioraisa. It may only remove the debt midirabanan. So, so that's. Well, the fact that you're entitled to debt collection it goes without saying. If the person has the wherewithal, if he has assets, as long as your debt is has a lien on his assets, you have a right to collect his assets without even going to a third party. We're not talking about that. What we're talking about is a situation where the guy just doesn't have the money to pay it back, and the expectation of the Torah is you feel sorry for this guy. This is not a stranger. This is a fellow Jew who borrowed the money because he was in a situation of desperation in the first place. And you gave him a 30-day loan with the expectation he'd be able to pay it back. And now you realize, no, he's just gotten himself further in the hole. And so there's two expectations. Number one, you're going to extend more time to pay it back. And number two, you have to also be sensitive to his feelings. That not only am I not allowed to ask him for the money, but I can't even walk in front of him and be around him so long as he might feel intimidation or embarrassment. Now, avol. So how does this affect two guys who daven at the same minyan? All right, avol im halova v'hamalva shnehem mitpalalim ba'oto beit hakneset uba'oso minyan v'yoshvim smuchim zelazeh. If the lender and the borrower daven in the same shul at the same minyan, they sit next to each other. And they've already become so used to each other's company that the lova is not at all pained by the guy's presence. Ein chiyuv al hamalva lalechet ulehitpalel bebeit knesset acher. The malva does not have the obligation to daven in another shul, or lahachlif es makom yeshivaso bebeis hakneses, or to change his seat in the shul. Why? He says, "Ki lefi shnei hatamim shepirshu amarim shipa hamalbim al malva lo over bazem mishum lo silo kenosha kiven shaloshina davar meher gelo." And the answer is that the only time that you become a person's oppressor is if you do something that was not habitual in the past. Like all of a sudden, you live 5 blocks away from him, and in order to get to shul every Shabbos, you don't need to walk past his house, but you make it a point to take a detour to walk past his house on Shabbos and wish him a good Shabbos so that he'll remember. That's what the Torah prohibits. But if it's not because of a detour, right, but you regularly walk past his house on Shabbos because he lives two doors away from you, and you just happen to, that's the way to get to shul, so you're not obligated to change your normal regular habits. That's the distinction that he's drawing. If you've already been davening in the same minyan with each other, you're not obligated to change what your regular habit is. And what is it based on? It's based on the fact that since this guy, the borrower, is used to this, he's not going to feel intimidation every time he comes into shul. It's just the regular habit. And as he says in the footnote, he says, Kain Svaras Rabbeinu Kasaf Aruch HaShulchan. He says the Aruch HaShulchan seems to say the same thing. The Kol Shahadavar Kvar Hugal Eitzel Halove, Ve'ein Lo Shum Tsar Bekach. He says, because if there's a regular pattern of interaction between the lender and the borrower, and so therefore it's not that the borrower receives new embarrassment because of this new behavior, because it's not new behavior. The Gama Malva lo mitkavein letzaro, and the Malva has no intention of intimidating or embarrassing him. Ein baze iser shelo lotia lo kenosha. There's no prohibition. The imkain hu adin benidon didan shekvar hurgalu liitpalel biyachad kol yom ba'oto makom. He says it's already predating the loan. They've always sat together in the same minyan together. And therefore the lova feels no undue pain, right? Just because the guy is sitting next to him. V'gam hamalva lo mitkavein letzaro, and it's not the malva's intention. Just he wants to sit in his regular seat at minyan. Ein bazeh shum isur. There is no prohibition. V'chein imhu ragil labor be'ize derech b'kvius. The same thing as if the malva regularly walks past a certain area where he knows he's likely to bump into the lova. Lo chayiv lahakif et haderech. He's not obligated to take a detour shelo yifgosh bo, to avoid seeing him. Kevin shehu lo mishaneh davar meher gelo, since he's not doing anything unusual as a result of the loan. So the bottom line is that the Torah only prohibits. And I just want to do this last footnote, but we'll have to wait until tomorrow. The Torah only prohibits you doing something that you would not normally have done. That's what the Torah says, do not be an oppressor to him, to go out of your way to appear before him. But if it's regular daily activity that you interact with each other at minyan or at a shir or whatever it is, so then there's no prohibition whatsoever. We'll hold it here.